Hello and welcome to the Civil Service Heads Together podcast, a product of the Civil Service Future Leaders programme, where two civil servants meet virtually and converse about their own experiences. We are passionate about wellbeing and mental health, and we recognise that talking about it can really help, particularly during a global pandemic. We hope you enjoy the podcast.
Right, hello and welcome to the Heads Together Civil Service podcast. Today we have James on the line, and we also have Lee Webb, who are going to hopefully discuss a bit with us about mental health, about wellbeing, and their experience of the coronavirus pandemic and how they've coped with it within the civil service. Do you guys both want to say a bit about yourself to start with? Maybe Lee, go first.
Yeah, so my name's Lee Webb. I'm currently a grade 7 within the Driver Vehicle Standards Agency. I've been a civil servant for 23 years. DVSA is my third agency. Previously worked in DWP and DVLA, and the last 2 years with the DVSA. And I lead a frontline team of 350 people.
Wow, brilliant. That's a lot.
It certainly is, which is fun most of the time, but actually during a global pandemic has been quite challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. How do you manage that in terms of, have you got quite a good support system? Do you have other people that help you out with that, or is it?
Yeah. So we got quite a large kind of management structure that kind of sit beneath that, So there's about 50 managers actually. So we're one big team, but it's because we're geographically dispersed across the whole of the UK. That's quite challenging, But I think COVID's been really difficult, but actually we've engaged and communicated with our people so much more since we've since we've entered the pandemic, and I think, we've really seen the benefit of Microsoft Teams,
Yeah, that sounds really encouraging, actually. It's good to hear about that. James, in your role, you're a mental health first aider, right? Do you want to say a bit about that and how that's impacted maybe your role a bit within the past year?
So I've been a mental health first aider for a couple of years now, along with about 60 others in the agency. And I suppose over the COVID year, it's definitely impacted my role in a sense where I've had to be definitely more aware of, other people around me, identifying certain behaviours which might indicate a bit of unhappiness, or whether someone needs to talk. People come in from all sorts of places around the agency, around the country, in particular, and asking, really just some people just want to listen, an ear so they can listen, and let their problems out, really. But my role really involves signposting people, so it's identifying where there might be some issues, offering that help out, whether that's through the GP, whether that's through occupational health, any aspects of that, really. So over the coronavirus, obviously people have had various ongoing, personal issues. We're all in a very unique situation. So really what I've found is, people just want to be heard. People just want to be listened to at the moment. It's a time of, where nobody knows really what's going to happen next. So that's what I found my role has been involved in the year, and it's definitely added its points to my ever existing job role in itself. And I've actually quite enjoyed the role over the year.
Yeah, brilliant. That's really nice to hear, actually. It's good to hear that someone who has that kind of role is enjoying it and is also encouraging it, because I feel that makes people more open to talking to people like you who are mental health first aiders. So that's really positive to hear. Can both of you tell me maybe how your life might have changed since entering the civil service? Because obviously civil service is a very big, wide organisation. There's a lot of different departments, a lot of things. Is it different from other jobs you've had in terms of like mental health support, in terms of well-being? How have you found it? Either one of you jump in.
I'll go first, and then James, as our mental health first aider, probably got a lot more experience in this. So I think the civil service is it's a great career for people, isn't it? we're so broad. There are so many roles in the civil service, but I think talking specifically about mental health and awareness, I think we're in such a better place now than where we were several years back. It is okay to talk about mental health now. I think across society, mental health's had quite a big stigma, hasn't it, attached to it and stuff. And I think we've really kind of broken down those barriers. And certainly in the agencies I've worked with, previously used to work in DWP, and a big huge part of the whole kind of universal credit drive, was about getting people with those kind of mental health issues kind of back into the workplace, people who'd never worked and stuff. So I think, I just think we're doing lots, in that space. And I think, the agency I'm currently in now, I think when I first joined, it was quite a macho. Well, it's a very male-dominated sector that I currently work in. So it's typically gentlemen in their 50s. A lot of the roles, kind of mechanics and stuff, where perhaps in the past they've not probably talked about mental health and some of the challenges that people have faced from time to time. But actually, it is really okay to talk about it now. And I think it's something that we encourage. We encourage people to look out for themselves, but to also look out for their colleagues. And it is about having those really good relationships, because if you've got those good, strong relationships, you can understand the changes and you can understand those little micro behaviors, in terms of where something's perhaps not quite right. And I think we're in a good place now. I think, we're similar to James, we've got mental health first aiders across the business, and that really helps. That's just another kind of person, where it's safe to have that conversation and to really understand what's going on and actually what can we do to help support them.
Yeah, brilliant. James, got anything to add from your perspective?
Well, I mean, for me, because I'm in the policing arena. I joined around nearly 6 years ago, really, and my first role was my first real job. Really, I moved from a tiny place in Devon, where I was in a very small house, all my friends and family, to somewhere where I didn't have family, I didn't have friends, close by. So it was a very difficult period of time. So I really, how the civil service had a really impact on me was, I think, for really just the moment I started, to be honest, where I learned that importance of having a real healthy balance of things going on in your life. I was very naive, very young, going into my role, thinking that, I could just work, I could go to the gym, and it'd be, everything would be fine. I'd be able to, progress fast, and it just wasn't the way. And I had no idea the real power of mental health and the things you need going on in your life. And I think it took a good year or two being on my own, realizing that I had nobody really to help me, was in terms of nearby, that I was going to have to figure out mentally how I could push myself forward. So for me, it was really important to reach out to mentors and to get that advice first and foremost. And then the other thing was just taking action, really, and creating a bit of a plan. Where for me, what works for me, I've got a whiteboard at home, stick it in front of my bed every morning. I've got a short-term goal for the day, I've got a middle-term goal, I've got a longer-term goal. And for me, what helps me really combat that mental health, that stress, was really just productivity. The brain for me is, it needs that production, that stimulation. The minute I'm sat down and I'm on my own thinking about things, whether it be work, anything else, that's where I feel the most with my mental health, going down. And it was really important for me to have a plan to be productive in that sense. So for me, my mental health journey starts from my first job in the civil service within policing, and actually learning how to cope and live on my own in a very isolated area of the country.
That's really good, actually. It's like so that's something that more people are more relating to with the coronavirus pandemic as well, because I think a lot of people have found themselves at home, maybe they live by themselves or just one other person, and they've kind of had to learn to almost live with themselves and live with how they deal more with their work-life balance, how they deal with their mental health being almost by themselves. So I think that's a really interesting way to like link to it, that obviously not in the coronavirus pandemic, but you still had to go through that. Do you think that that helped you become a mental health first aider, and the way that you dealt with your own kind of made you want to help other people with it?
Oh, absolutely. You know, this wasn't something I wanted to do when I first joined, but I just soon realised, from going through my own problems and you know, and issues with sort of mental health and learning to live on my own, that I was learning to identify what, you know, my colleagues and whether when they were sad and when they were going through things, I didn't even have to ask them. I sort of knew. So it was really I was becoming more self-aware because I'd gone through those problems. I'm more self-aware of the people around me, and that really sparked me to not just work on the mental health aspect, to work on that community focus. So wherever I was, I wanted to create an environment by creating initiatives. It could be a very small thing, just where people can come together and chat and, you know, feel safe, feel that they can talk to each other. And one of the things I did in my first role was just very simple, really. It was just, we had a dinner area, and there's no canteens anywhere. There's no way you can get food. So I did my own shopping. I scoped out different sources of different snacks and whatever, and I just created this tuck shop, which was sort of self-funded by myself, and I'd use the profits to go to charity. But what I did was just create this environment where people could grab a snack, go away from the desks, and chat to people around them that were doing exactly the same thing. I could notice people's well-being, mental health just improved because the environment was a lot safer. So it really sparked an interest from that first role in identifying mental health and creating environments where, you know, people can thrive and not have to go through things on their own.
Brilliant. That's really nice to hear. We have something so that in my place of work with Tuck Shop, but I think people definitely enjoy the kind of community aspect of it. I suppose that's one of the things that COVID's kind of taken away a bit. Obviously, across the civil service, some people are in the office, some people are out of it. How would both of you say that you've obviously had to manage either people around you's well-being or even your own? Because I guess when you're either a mental health first aider or you're in charge of a team, you're both having to make sure everybody else is okay. But do you often find that it takes off, like it puts pressure on you and you kind of forget about your own mental health? Or have you found that you've managed to kind of get into a routine where you've managed to have a good work-life balance? Like, how have you basically been coping with your own well-being? Lee, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Anna, and I think people do forget sometimes that as managers, we do struggle with our own mental health because, you know, we care so much, and we're so passionate about our people. And this year has been unique, hasn't it, in terms of the worries that we've carried. You know, I've had so many members of my staff that have, you know, been infected with COVID, and unfortunately I've lost a couple, you know, and that's been really, really challenging in terms of my mental health. And yeah, it's interesting, you know, since we joined the pandemic, actually I took up the couch to 5K, you know, so I've built that into my daily routine now, where, you know, I actually go running every morning at 6:30, and it provides me with, you know, an opportunity to kind of clear my head. But, you know, prior to the pandemic, my thinking time was when I was driving to work or when I was driving around the country. That's been taken away, so that just gives me that time to just kind of consider my thoughts and stuff. But for me, you know, the biggest kind of stress buster, because of the way that I like to work, is that there's so much stuff going around in my head that I need to just kind of write down lists and put things down in plans, you know, and just so, because otherwise I end up lying awake at 3 a.m. thinking about them. You know, you desperately want to try and get back to sleep because, you know, you've got to get up soon. But actually there's just too much going on in there, you know, so trying to keep to some form of structure, you know, just so that and almost, you know, there's been periods in the last 12 months where things have been so crazy where you're almost frightened to look into the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks because there's so much in the diary. It's literally back to back, you know, from 8 till 5:30 every day, no break, etc. So it's almost a case of developing that coping mechanism, right? Let's just get through today. I think, like James said earlier, it's almost just some goals for that particular day. Otherwise, you get too far ahead of yourself, and then you end up just kind of tipping yourself over, where, you're not at your best. And if you're not at your best, then your team's not gonna, they're not going to be feeling it. So having that self-awareness is really important to understand actually when you're thriving, and when you're really kind of delivering, because that's where you'll get that, spark that innovation and all the good stuff. But I think having that critical friend is also really important.
Yeah.
Or, a close colleague, a peer, somebody to chew the fat over with. That, again, that's really good for kind of, they say, sharing is caring. And it certainly works well for me, having a strong support system and structure in work,
Brilliant. Obviously the same for you, James, being the mental health first aider. Do you ever think that almost puts pressure on your own mental health because you're too busy worrying about everybody else's?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely a common problem, I suppose. Even with your family, and I think what I learned really in the pandemic sort of area, but also during my time where I was quite isolated, was just that need to sort of have that something like Lee just said, to have that sort of structure so important. I mean, for me it was just, even now I'll wake up and it could be something really stupid. It could be to learn 5 new words in, I don't know, French or something, just through the day, just to keep the brain ticking, having something to look forward to. I love football, so I'll have a fixture list in front of me, but you know what, I'm looking forward to that date there. So having little things to look forward to, and the way I feed that back to the people around me, really, again, I like to be quite community focused. So even with colleagues, I'm constantly phoning colleagues and I'm asking them, how was your weekend? What are you doing today, or what are you doing later to to chill out, to escape? And people say they're going for walks or whatever. So really, what I try to emphasise is really what I feed back into my life, where I structure things and I have small, tiny things that can get me through a day. I try and feed back to the people around me, and I like to know that they're doing things that will keep them going through the day as well. So I try and sort of intertwine everything all together, which I hope is working. I don't know, but
do you reckon they're like your top tips for lockdown survival? And do you reckon just having small victories or small things to look forward to is like the best thing for lockdown survival?
Oh, absolutely. It's productivity. I think that's the way. I don't know where I read a quote somewhere that the brain isn't designed, for happiness. It's designed to survive, and to be able to survive, the brain needs to be able to feel like it's moving forward in some sort of area. The minute you're stagnant, the minute you're sat not doing much at all, is when you start big things, problems start to arise, because the brain is all the time thinking, well, what's going on here? Survive. So I always say to people, absolutely talk to people. That's really important. You need to be doing that, but also have some sort of productive plan. What are you doing today? What are you doing tomorrow? Don't let yourself sit down for too long. I mean, Netflix is brilliant, but for me, if I watch too much Netflix, I don't feel that fulfillment. It's all about that reward system in the brain, isn't it? I want to try and access that reward system.
Brilliant. Would you say a similar thing, Lee? Because obviously, whole lockdown tips, you say you do your running. What would you say, particularly, obviously, you manage quite a few people. How do you help your staff or encourage you or your staff to kind of maintain the work-life balance? Because for me, I heard a phrase recently with the whole working from home thing, which said it's not working from home, it's almost living at work. And how would you encourage your staff to take that kind of break away from work? Because I know that I struggled with it when
it's so interestingly, a couple of months back, maybe 6 months back, we found that certainly everybody in the immediate kind of management chain, we were literally having no breaks all day, and it was just not healthy. You just get total burnout, and then things tend to spiral from there. So we kind of introduced 3 times a week. We called them well-being sessions, where we would have 3 1-hour calls every week with our managers, and we just kind of blocked out the half hour before that. And we said, right, use that time so people can't book any time in your calendar, go for a walk, do whatever you need to do, but actually switch off, get that screen time away, because that is the danger working from home, that you never switch off, and it's so tempting to want to respond to an email at 10 o'clock at night, or at 6 o'clock in the morning if you're like me and you get up early. But actually it's the impact on your people, on your colleagues, it's not good. And we always kind of devote a large part or a certain part of our kind of catch-ups actually talking about just general stuff, stuff outside of work. And I think James mentioned there, I think having those strong relationships with your people, checking in with them really regularly, like you would in an office environment, how are you, what'd you get up to last night, did you watch the match, etc. I think that's still really important to keep that going, else we're literally just living and breathing work, 24/7, and it's not fun. So I think work needs to be fun. We spend so much of our time, so much of our lives in work, that I really feel sorry for people that don't enjoy the job, and it's a fine balance, isn't it, about people being passionate for work but actually understanding where the line is and where people need to take a break. So
yeah, it's good to hear that you've had that support system in your job, because I think that's a really, really nice thing to do. It really helps probably your staff take off the pressure a little bit, which is really nice to hear. Obviously at the minute it's been a year since the last lockdown and we finally got a roadmap out of it, whether we'll stick to it or not. What do you think you would take from this past year, from working at home, from new mental health kind of things that you're having to get over? What would you take from the last year and the last lockdown and bring with you into a hopefully post-COVID world?
Yeah, well, I'll go first. So I think again, this type of meeting works really well. So prior to that, we'd all meet up once a month, and we'd stay a couple of nights down, whether it's London, Bristol, etc. I don't think we'd ever go back to that now. I think actually speaking to one another or to the team, almost on a daily basis, works far better than meeting up once a month, perhaps with the odd check-in. So I think, pardon me, I've got a fly in the throat. do you want to jump in?
You're right, Lee.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. So for me, really, I think it sounds a bit of woo-woo magic, but I just really, I don't know what it is, but I suppose you go by everyday life, especially in London over here, I just don't really take into account, the sounds and things going on around me, and just pausing for like 1 second, just being like, you know what? Yeah, look at that tree. That's quite a nice little tree over there. I mean, it sounds a little bit ridiculous, but actually, because that's been our only thing really that can give us a break. I've just to get out there and just sit in a park and just be like, I don't need headphones in. I don't need any mobiles or computers in front of me. Just sit there and enjoy the atmosphere, and listen to something, and listen to what's going on over there, and just taking things in a bit more. And I think, but for me going forward, I'm going to make sure I go to more nature reserves or different excursions here, there, and everywhere, and just take into account how lucky we are to live in such a wonderful environment.
Nice, I like that. I think I'll take that advice and do the same thing, actually. That's really nice. Would you say that, do you reckon most people will take what they've got from working from home and still maintain the kind of home life working, or do you reckon more people will be wanting to get into the office and wanting to socialise? Because obviously, Lee, you said that you think you'll do more teams-based things because that's what your team do. But do you reckon some people will almost go the opposite and be like, I don't want to work at home anymore because they've done it for so long?
Personally, I think there'll be a mixed economy. I think there are some people, and I think you touched upon it earlier, Anna, that there are some people, if they live on their own, they can't wait to get back into the offices. And, we've got certain individuals where they've flagged, from a mental health perspective, actually, they need to work in the office, and we've accommodated that. I think there are other people where actually having the flexibility to work at home and kind of managing childcare and, being a bit more, kind of creative in terms of how they use their time. I think that's worked really well for some. And then, I suspect the majority of us will probably do half and half, really. So we'll spend some time in the office and then, other time at home. So I don't, I've heard the saying that we've kind of let the genie out of the bottle in terms of home working, and I don't think we're going to get it back in there. We've kind of accelerated that across society, and we've probably done it in fast forwarded 10 years in terms of where we're at now. So
no. James, you got anything to add or similar?
Yeah, I mean, I want to Lee touch on that flexibility. I think for a lot of people, with families, I think even being able to do a job from elsewhere in the country, not necessarily having to be in that location, could be quite a positive thing for a lot of people. I think humans we are built to engage. I think, especially in the policing world, to be in the same office, I would say it's very important, for that productivity and to be able to work quite closely, especially in sort of time limited environments. So, what do I predict? Well, I predict similar to Lee, really. I think it's going to take time for people to come back straight away. I think you will get a bit of a mixture, but I think people will want to come back and do that social side. Not everybody, but I think a lot of people miss that social sort of, even that background noise, to be honest, can be quite nice sometimes. So yeah, I mean, who knows what will happen? But personally, I hope people come back. So I'm a little bit of an extrovert. I love socialising. It'd be great to have people come back.
Yeah, I don't mean I'd be back in the office maybe twice a week, and just even having someone to make a comment to is just so nice to have. And I think actually people will appreciate being in the office a bit more because they haven't had it in so long, which will be interesting to see. So obviously we're mainly talking about well-being. So just to kind of finish up, what do you think are the most common barriers for people either at the minute or when they go back to work? What do you reckon their most common barrier will be to do with their well-being, and how would you advise someone to overcome it, either as a managerial perspective or mental health first aider perspective?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there'll be, kind of common barriers. I think for some people coming back into the office environment or wherever their home location is, that will create an anxiety in itself. And I think that, if there's going to be one big challenge, that's going to be the challenge. I mean, obviously across the workforce, we've almost done the categorization of our people, haven't we? So the people who are clinically extremely vulnerable, the people who are clinically vulnerable, and everybody else. And I think certainly in my workforce, I've seen that anxiety across the range of those individuals. And so I think, we've got quite a bit of coaching to do with some of these people, in terms of, and again, it's kind of using some of those mental health tools, isn't it? Those scaling questions in terms of where they feel now, and actually what could we do, whether that's an individual risk assessment with them, stress risk assessment, etc., to get them into that good place where they're going to feel better, So I think it all comes down to having conversations with people, good, open, honest conversations with people, and for people to call it out, in terms of actually what those barriers are so that we can address it,
Brilliant, yeah. James?
Yeah, what I see generally, not just in work, but in the public, it's going to take a while. Again, those anxieties, at least said, it's going to take a while for people to be comfortable in closed environments with a lot of people. So I think it's really important now, especially, looking at really from a leadership angle, is to make sure that, we have that training so we can identify when people are feeling, you can see when somebody's not feeling right, and being able to have that chat with them in advance, maybe, phase them in. I think right when we come back, there's a real onus on leadership to, gather their team and just be very specific on things that they're looking for. Like one of my best managers, he used to be so good at picking out, inches. He won't mind me shouting him out. Hugh was, he'd noticed if I come in, I hadn't shaved, I hadn't said good morning or anything like that. He'd ask me, he'd call me in a room, he'd ask me, James, I've noticed these things. I just want to make sure you're all right. And just little tiny things like that, little inches, can make a complete difference in somebody's mood when they come into work. They know that person's looking out for them. They know somebody cares. And I think that's really important when we come back, that leadership is able to sort of set that example.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's definitely important. I think 'cause everyone tends to look to their managers, and even if you're a manager, looking to your manager, looking to other members of your team to kind of notice how people are feeling. And I think particularly in this past year, we've kind of had a bit more of a onus put onto mental health, and people are kind of realizing it more and realizing the importance of it more. And I think that's probably one thing that the pandemic has encouraged is conversations about mental health. Obviously, this podcast came out of it because we want to encourage civil servants to get talking about it, because I think it's something that affects everyone, whoever you are, whichever job you're in, etc. So it's really nice to hear from you both and to hear your opinions on it. If anyone's got any other questions or anything, any questions you want to ask each other?
Lee, what's the, because you're managing so many people, what is the, how do you manage so many people's mental health at sort of one given time? How have you come up with different initiatives to sort of keep an eye on everybody? Because I imagine it'd be quite difficult.
Not real kind of initiatives, I think before we kind of went into with the pandemic and stuff, we started to do we started to try and encourage, a lot more kind of frequent, kind of regular one-to-ones with staff, because in the current organisation I was in, it was probably once a quarter, and actually that didn't feel right. It needs to be at least once a month, if not, once a week or every day, ideally, So I think that's been a big push for us in terms of doing that. I think that they implemented the mental health first aiders in there, and it's almost just kind of making people aware in terms of all the different kind of resources they've got, whether it's EAP, whether it's a colleague and stuff, and it's just, I think it's just encouraging people to talk. I think I mentioned before, we're a very male dominated department, and actually it didn't come natural to people. So it's just trying to break down some of those traditional barriers that were in place, because some people's perception was always a little bit fluffy, when we don't do that type thing. So yeah, it's just trying to push it out there that actually it's good to talk, it's good to have those conversations. It's okay to ask people how they're feeling, do you know what I mean? And like you mentioned, that actually, do you know what I've noticed, that over the last couple of days or the last week or two, I've noticed slightly different behavior, and is there anything going on? Is there anything you'd like me to tell, to talk about? So I think we've just encouraged our people to just be better people leaders, James.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good to hear.
Yeah. James, have you found that people have kind of sought out your services as a mental health advisor more over the past year, or do you reckon it's just like a stagnant thing that keeps happening, or do you actually think that people are more aware of your role and therefore reach out for more help?
Yeah, it's definitely more so over the last year, and not just people I know as well have reached out, and they've just wanted someone to listen to, really. And I think it's definitely something I've noticed over the last year. People I think it's just extra time on their own, overthinking, and it's just nice to be able to chat and to have that like sort of friendly figure. And I'm quite an outgoing guy, so for me, I'm going to blow my own trumpet, but I feel like I'm quite a good listener. I don't necessarily give advice unless I'm asked to. It's always, I'm there to listen. So I think people around me, ex-colleagues, colleagues, know that I'm that guy that they can come to just to let something out or whatever. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, it's really good to hear. Like Lee, you sound like you've been very supportive of your team. That's really nice to hear. Particularly in the civil service, I think people would like that encouragement a lot. And obviously, James, you sound like you're doing an incredible job, and it sounds like you've made a lot of people feel better and feel supported, which is really nice to hear. So thank you both for coming on. It's been really informative. It's been really nice to talk to you. Yes, thank you very much. Thanks to everyone else for listening.